For those using Azure DevOps and want to use Atlas's version migrations, Atlas now has an Azure Pipelines integration, and I'm going to show you how that works with version migrations, featuring 3 different tasks. We have migrate lint, migrate diff, and migrate push. So let's get started with our setup. The first thing we'll want is to inspect our database and have it stored locally as code. So we'll do this by running an Atlas schema inspect command that looks something like this with your database URL. And the split and write commands do the following. They store the schema in the schema's directory with a different directory for each individual schema. And within each schema, there is a folder for each object type, and then a file for each individual object. Then all of these files are imported into a main.sql file, and this becomes our schema definition. The next thing we'll want to do is create a baseline migration. There's a video going more in depth on what a baseline migration is, but you can see here we already have this, and it's just all of the SQL commands that get us to our current database state. The last thing we'll want to do is push our current schema to Atlas Cloud. So we'll run atlas migrate push with our repository name, and then also the Atlas environment that we're using. And what will come out is a link to the Atlas Cloud. And here now you can see in the Atlas Cloud, I have a full view of my entire schema with all of the objects. So now that we have everything set up, let's go through with creating a new migration using Atlas's automated schema change management. So there are 2 options for the user. You can either change only your schema, and then Atlas will generate the necessary migration files using the migrate diff task that we have here in CI, or you can just create your migration change locally using the Atlas migrate diff command. We will be doing the latter. So what I'm going to do is just go into a random table, and let's add a column at the bottom here. So I'm going to create an updated at column, and I'll make this not null. Let's see what happens there. So now what I'll do is I'll run atlas migrate diff, again with my Atlas environment. And what this will do is create a new migration file here in my migrations directory. So you can see a new file has been made, and it adds in this column. The next step is going to be committing and pushing this to our GitHub repository. So you can see here I'm on a different branch. I'm on an n/demo branch. And what I'll do is I will add my migrations directory and also my schemas directory because I had made a change to my schema. I will commit this with a message just saying add column. And then I'll push this to my GitHub repo. So now that I've pushed those files to my branch on GitHub, I created a pull request to pull that into my main branch, that migration and schema change. And this triggered the CI. So this triggered that Azure DevOps pipeline. And I now have an Atlas migrate lint report on my PR. And we can see that it detected some data-dependent changes. Since updated at was created to be non-nullable, it will fail in the case that the table it's in is not empty. But let's look a little bit more at the actual Azure DevOps integration by going into the details and finding it on Azure Pipelines. We'll go into the job. And so you can see that despite all of the code being hosted on GitHub, it's an Azure DevOps configuration. So it's running as tasks in Azure DevOps pipeline. So it ran all of these tasks. We get into installing Atlas and getting the Atlas version, logging into Atlas Cloud, and then we get to the actual individual tasks. So Atlas migrate lint, we saw how that ran and created a report for us. Then it ran Atlas migrate diff. And since there were no changes detected beyond the migration that we had created, there was no reason to create a new migration file. And because of that, we got to skip the Atlas migrate push because there was nothing that needed to be pushed, at least from the CI perspective. So now that we've seen how all of this works, let's merge this pull request. Now that our PR has been merged into the main branch, the migrate push task gets executed in CI. And our migration file has now been pushed into Atlas Cloud. So if we go into CI runs, we'll see that migrate lint command that linted our migration and found an issue with it. And we can also look at the migrate push task that was executed. and see our column getting added to the schema along with the migration file. We can also go to the ERD, the updated ERD, and see our changes by turning on this diff and comparing our migration file to our original baseline file that we had made. And you can see the updated at column being added right over here. So we can see a successful use of the Azure Pipelines Atlas integration within GitHub, Azure Pipelines, and Atlas Cloud. You can check out this configuration yourself following the link in the description. And down there, you'll also find links to other relevant videos and documentation. So thanks for watching this video.